crossing the
We're not live, right?
What's up, everybody?
Oh yeah, we are.
Welcome to ThugCrowd Radio.
Yep, we're live.
Please listen to this important disclaimer in its entirety. All participants of this ThugCrowd Radio episode are characters.
I just wanted
None
to
of the stories told during these episodes are based on facts, truth, or reality. All works of fiction displayed during this episode that resemble real-life situations are coincidental and are not meant to serve as guides or tutorials to commit any crimes in any country. Please consult an attorney for local laws and regulations. And as always, trust your inner criminal.
Hey everybody. Hey
What's happening?
Welcome. It's time for another rip-roaring episode of ThugCrowd, our favorite podcast.
Our podcast for sure, definitely.
Hell yeah. Oh wait, where's Hayden? You in here? Come back.
Yeah, there he is.
Sorry, nodyaH.
Oh snap! There you are. My
What's up,
bad.
nodyaH?
I'm back. How's it going?
It's going good. We just went live, and we are here. So yeah, tonight we have a lot of news. I realize as we're dumping stuff into the news channel, how much news was generated this week. Because it's also interesting.
Real quick before the news starts, though, man, what about that DVD thing? Is it going to hit the corner?
Yeah. So this is a 2-hour loop of the DVD thing, and supposedly, well, actually, I know that there are 2 instances in which this hits the corner. And so if anybody is able to identify those 2 points, or either any point, will get their name displayed on our screen for the rest of the show. So
comments to find it, you're not doing it right.
Yeah. I mean, this
restart it so they can't tell where it is.
Well, no, it's been playing for a little bit, and it should eventually also loop. I don't know if there'll be 3 instances of it, but yeah, this will
find out.
Definitely something that if you are keen enough of an eye, you'll be able to see. Also, this is something I used to do all the time as well, and as many people have. Just one of life's simple pleasures. Just sit and watch everything float around.
Bad DVD though, like when you don't hit play to rewatch some terrible movie, you're like, I'm just gonna watch this animation.
Absolutely, and you just
do something more fun than watching.
Actually, I don't think it did just hit the corner because the first, I know the times of them, so it should have already hit it once before I even started streaming. So give it a little bit and you'll see. There's a couple of close ones. I almost watched this whole thing in its entirety. So like that one right there that just happened was not a real one. That was a fake out, classic fake out.
Excellent.
But hell yeah. So yeah, tonight we're going to be talking with nodyaH here, who is a journalist who writes on industry news and other cultural topics, and he's going to talk to us about being a journalist and the techniques and attitude that you have as a journalist that is similar to the hacker mindset, and some of the ways that he has employed some techniques to get more information. So yeah, excited to hear about that at 10:30 or in an hour. But how's everybody's weekend this weekend?
Really quick, actually, for me. I don't know about you guys.
So much bug fixing. What's up, guys?
Oh, mine was quite interesting. You know, we had the nice little power outages.
Oh yeah, did you have that barbecue? Did you have the barbecue you were talking about?
Well, see, I ended up making some nice ribs here for myself, and I ended up eating it all myself because I'm a fat ass, and yeah.
I mean, what better
Well,
excuse
good on you, man.
than for that, power outage?
Well, I guess it actually made me, makes you actually have to cook, Normally that would have just sat there for like another month before I ended up cooking it.
Just as long as you take the garbage out occasionally, you can survive for months with just DoorDash or diabetes dash, as I call it.
Diabetes dash. Weekend. My weekend. Let's see. Perfectly close to an international manhunt. That was pretty cool. I don't know.
Do tell.
Yeah, can you
maybe
talk
maybe
about that at all?
Maybe after hours.
Okay.
Sure.
Guess how I started all my sentences. I just go, started selling antennas. Actually, sent in a order for new PCBs for a little quick circuit that actually makes blinky light things go at 14 hertz for funsies. So yeah, actually pretty productive.
Blinking lights or blinking LED? Blinking IR LED.
LEDs for traffic light funsies. Don't do it.
Don't
do it.
Wait, like a MERT for traffic light? Did you say?
Parasitation systems.
Oh, fun! That's really cool.
Oh, you're getting one.
Nice.
So if we put these on our stack hats on our bike helmets while we rollerblade down the streets of New York, it'll be just like the movies.
I wonder what would happen if you put it on a Crown
I'll
Vic.
stack the system back up so we get pagers. So that might require a little bit there.
Nice, just a full recreation of the infamous movie.
Hell yeah. So yeah. We should start off with some. Oh, also I meant to say too. We are going to be offering our very own CLSSP cert. So keep a lookout for that very soon.
That's one of my favorite things that we're doing.
It's the alternative to the CISSP, which now stands for the capital I Substitution Security Professional. So just that's a holograph attack, and it's ours.
And it's a homograph attack that might actually get you temporarily employed until they figure it out, and then things go really bad.
Yeah, we'll print out some certifications, real nice, look very, professional, and then LinkedIn and everything, your Twitter bio. Be CLSSP.
I really hope that we can have some form of if people can earn CPEs towards the actual CISP, I think that would be double good.
Just by some good shit posts, right?
Yeah. You can imagine getting the CPEs for watching our podcast. That's actually the qualifications for it. So you get 2 hours and then a half an hour if you watch the pre-show.
It's a requirement.
Yeah.
One pre-show is a requirement. The rest are optional. So we'll have all the full terms of service coming soon. All right, let's get into the news. But what I did with the news this week was try to divide it up into specific sections. That is basically, I'm trying to make it so that we can focus on one topic, like general sort of topic, and then talk about news within that. And then if it kind of goes on too long, we can move ahead to the other ones. I definitely try to just make it a little bit easier. There's a huge volume of news this week, so let's get into it. I posted the show notes in the Twitch chat, and I also have posted them. I'll post them again in general here, or voiceless voice. So in case anybody has not seen yet. Let's start off with the cyberpunk dystopia IRL category. So you guys saw this this police forcing me to install the spyware app, How Do I Minimize the Impact thing?
Oh, wow, what the hell?
Yeah, so there's this apparently like police in China are forcing whole cities to install an Android spyware app and stopping people in the streets and detaining people who refuse to install it.
Wow.
Well, in my opinion, like when you get a phone shipped out to you, just assume that the feds intercepted it at the post office.
Yeah, you would assume that, but wait a minute. This is actually surprising to me that they have to do this measure. You would assume Huawei and all that is already kind of compromised. So that's interesting.
I mean,
it's not.
not assume. Like the thing is, we've seen evidence that their infrastructure is owned.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying though. Like, you would think that they don't need to have the police sitting there bullying people in the middle of the street, and yet here we are.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
I think it's like one thing to say about Chinese manufacture though, that that they're master of replicating other items. So why hasn't somebody made a an app that, so like for example, when you get your train ticket or bus ticket or whatever checked by an inspector, they look at it and they're like, yeah, that's a valid ticket, and then they sort of move on. Like how are they visually inspecting it? Are they like, oh, you have the app installed, or is there some sort of NFC they need to tap against? Or it would be interesting to have like a replicated app that would perform that
Yeah.
validation.
You know, we really do need to get a plug from over there that can get us all this stuff to play with, because we talk about it every week almost, about something or another coming up, and I think it'd be really fun if we could like get a hold of some of these APKs and other apps, and actually use them firsthand, and then
Yeah.
obviously
definitely.
own the shit out of them secondhand.
Get up in that blue stacks.
So yeah, the next one related to China too was pretty interesting as well. So it was the Google suppressing a memo that reveals plans to closely track user searches in China. And so basically, it would be there's this codenamed project Dragonfly that users basically would have their location and searches tracked, and like give it and pointed at to a specific user, like your email, and this partner of theirs, of Google's, would have unilateral access to the data. And so they're trying to suppress it basically by telling everybody that they have to delete the memo and all this, but people
What?
don't know about it.
Wait, so Google's not pushing back on the thing; they're pushing back on the fact that the fucking memo's getting released?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Google,
Yeah.
come on.
So
Jeez.
pretty interesting. I mean, I don't know. It sucks because it's just like, what do you do at this point?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
China.
they're such a big player. How do you push back against an
Mhm.
entire country that's that powerful? Especially with the amount of trade they control and all that.
I just want to point out in this.
Do it. Just do it. You push back.
Well,
In this
I agree.
article, the head of security at Google, Chris Rakow, if that's how you say his name, described himself, blah, blah, blah. And a former U.S. Navy SEAL, I'll have you know that I graduated at the top of my class.
Oh, wait, no, did he really say that?
Yeah, it's near the bottom. It's the third last paragraph.
Did he take
How many
it further
confirmed
to the
kills does he
knee?
have?
Oh, more than you, buddy.
I mean, marketing data is essentially citizen data, though.
Yeah.
telemetry. Advertising data is citizen data.
Yeah, agreed.
Mhm.
It's too bad, man. Yeah, any kind of telemetry, really, just and I know like my voice right now isn't gonna make it out to that many people that are making decisions about this kind of stuff. But seriously, even little things that we do, like if you don't have to log stuff, don't log it, man, because then you're potentially becoming a source in the future.
Hey,
And
no logs, no crime.
well, yeah, no evidence, no crime. Sure, that's a real thing though, right? Like the IP echo backer thingy that I did, I have 0 logs on it. I can't even debug log it, and that resulted in a lot of swearing to try and fix it. But man, if bigger companies like tech companies started taking that mindset of let's absolutely not collect this.
Yeah, I
I
think
guess it's hard for Google though.
Well, there was like some ideas that we used to throw around back in the day of CD-ROMs of just why don't we boot all our web servers off CD, off off read-only media, and serve it out, and then set the box to reboot on cron every however, and then that's it. Like, what are you're gonna have to have physical access and do some cold boot memory shit if you want to do any forensics on it,
I think the problem is it's just it's too sexy to keep an aggregate of all your log data, and there's all these cool Splunk index transforms you can make, and we kind of become blinded by this accessibility, and then all of a sudden we're actually collecting and it's being used for something evil all of a sudden.
Not to mention that there's like a general push towards like big data and what you can do with data and how you can better serve your users with data and like this and that.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
seeing so many people go into data science, and it's like it's unfortunately it's the world we're like moving into is like so very heavily data focused.
Yeah, it's too bad. By the way, I just got to point out really quick before we get too far past it. Viper Bite noticed it hit the corner, and he got it right at the same time that I think it actually hit the corner in Twitch chat.
You know what? Probably right. Actually, you are right.
I saw. What does he win? Tell him at the end of the show, or tell him now.
I was just putting his name on the screen.
Okay. Yeah, dude up. Viper Bite and lead speed.
Viper Bite, I'll give you something. I'm not making it weird. Actually, I just got some shit. I like some beta testers, so I'll just send you something if that's chill.
Sweet. Yes. Give us your address. Dox yourself.
Yeah.
Also, hope you're into anime.
About PO boxes or anything. Just give me your home address.
I'll send you a baggie of random Radio Shack components.
One of each drug.
That's actually kind of hard to find these days over here. If you could send me a random pack of Radio Shack components, that'd be awesome.
Some Tandy
Hey,
parts.
we could do a weekly giveaway for a month of baggy random Radio Shack components.
Oh, wow. Yeah, all right. Let's do this. It's a good vehicle to get rid of our extra equipment.
We can get a whole bunch of resistors and we can we can tag them up and bag them up, and we can send them out as an organized resistance.
I gotta mention Fred F 1969. They both said it at the same time.
Oh, is this the time that was before?
I don't know, man. I
was
think
confirmed. This should have been so.
It was really
I can't tell the exact times that it happens because then I will. But I know when I started the stream, and it's either at this point now. You know what? I'll just put them both up here.
Yeah, let's do that because they did.
Yeah. Where is that?
I definitely have been watching. I gotta admit, I've been watching the fucking thing. Like,
hey,
it's an easy thing to watch.
On
the eyes.
Yeah,
there's a whole episode of The Office on that. But anyway.
Yeah. Let's get to the next thing. Actually, Zuff, do you want to talk about this real quick? Because you just said that your hardening guide addresses this issue. This is the Windows is recording every keystroke on devices with handwriting recognition enabled.
Yeah, so they do this. It's obviously not remediated in most enterprise environments because nobody with half a brain, that lacks a brain, is going to do this. But yeah, if you're worried about your personal devices or even your work devices, I do have a hardening guide on my blog that goes through this stuff, and it actually remediates this issue and this logging. This is something they're collecting. Again, even going into the next topic, like Apple is quietly giving people trust scores. It's the same thing. What's really sad is, like, I think from a nation state level is we're slowly seeing ourselves become China or take note from China.
Wait, what did you say about trust scores though?
Well, the next topic was about Apple and trust scores for people, just kind of like China's doing on a nation state level. But
right
on my blog, it's nomtechbytes.com. But you go in there, there's a hardening guide for Windows 10 on 1803, which is the latest build, and it actually remediates this. There is no file logging your keystrokes or logging anything for that matter. I think there's like 480 domains within Windows on a default install that are tracking certain things you're doing. So
man, and you made a thing to get rid of all of it. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I'll plug it in chat real quick.
Yeah, definitely. We'll retweet it after the show too. That's good stuff. Hardening guides, everybody's like, oh, at least I know when I've looked at them, it's something that you're like, well, somebody's already probably done this, but it's always good to do your own because you'll first of all learn something, but going through your repo. I guarantee I'm gonna learn some stuff tonight when I look at it.
I think with hardening as well, it's one of those things where I always like to think, if I was the attacker, what would really piss me off? Like if I can, if I can't access like /proc, would I be mad? Like, yeah, I'd be pretty mad. Okay, good.
Yeah, think about like every CTF you've done and vulnerable or vuln image or whatever, like all the different things that have just pissed you off so bad. You're like, I'll put that in next time. I'll make sure that there's no SCID on any classes. Like, shit like that. But yeah. So yeah, the next one here though, the Apple is quietly giving people trust scores, is interesting. It's something that when I was reading it, I wasn't sure if like I see the point, but at the same time, I also see where it could be misused in a way. So basically, what they're trying to do is give trust scores based on your like calls, emails, your usage to see how trustworthy you are. But I mean, when people they said that it's trying to mitigate fraud, and they don't really give specific reasons. But I mean, there's a lot of fraud that happens through like the Apple Store and through money laundering for all sorts of scams and weird crap like that. And so I feel like it might be a little too ahead of its time, I guess, to be able to properly implement. But at the same time, I see why it's happening. So I don't know if you guys have any opinions on that.
It just seems like a cover-up story when you're talking about like, having a resolution for fraud. It's just bullshit.
Yeah,
they want as much info as possible. Pisses me off.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what the privacy advocate in me says. But then also, I know that people do like iTunes gift card fraud and like Apple Store gift card fraud and stuff like that, and like people just pump a lot of stuff through there. But the weird thing is like the sort of the calls and emails, like the approximate number of calls and emails is one of the metrics that's being used to compute your trust score. So I don't really understand that aspect.
It's kind of like how like Hotmail and Gmail and all these like email providers have been doing the same sort of thing for a while now.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know what the exact motive is or if it's listed in the story. This is one story I didn't get a chance to look at, but there's not a lot of motive for them to collect other than potentially to try and start clamping down on the, how there's the spear phishing stuff to get your iCloud credentials, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
This could very well be tied in with that, but again, I'm not terribly sure. I haven't looked at it.
Yeah. I mean, with collecting the score as well, it could be related to using Apple Pay and stuff like that. So if you're a known fraudster, maybe Apple Pay won't be available to you.
Yeah. Or it'll be extra available because you're bringing in money.
Of course.
Available. So yeah, the next part of our news segment is the vulns and bugs category. So the first story here, when I first saw it, because of the site that it's posted on, I'd never seen lols.com before, so I hadn't seen it anywhere else really. But I read the kernel mailing list. This is about the Linux developers who are threatening to pull the kill switch on Linux in response to the code of conduct issues that they've been having.
Oh my God.
Basically, there are people who do not agree with the code of conduct because their point is that they don't want to have any sort of arbitrary like flavor of the month, in their view, rules that would dictate how they talk to each other and communicate on the kernel mailing list, because ultimately they only care about if someone's code is good or not, right? So, but the thing that they are threatening the Linux Foundation with is copywriting all of their contributions and just dipping out, which would mean that any future releases of the kernel would have to not have that code and have that code reworked into it.
And they even do that?
Yeah,
they can retroactively copyright some shit. I don't think so. There's no fucking way.
It's part of the license. The
GPL2.
Wow.
The GPL2 does allow for it. The GPL3 apparently has a clause that doesn't allow for it.
But so there's at least another iteration that they have to go through before they're able to do some kind of shit like that, because that would just be insanity. Like you
Yeah.
could, like it, and it sounds like it is insanity. Like we're apparently on the verge of an entire distro or entire flavor of Unix going away because of
SJW.
yeah, well, because of a petty fight that
It's
has
not even about
nothing to do with technology. It has something to do with social issues.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where like social issues have like come and thrown their way into technology yet again. But
It's too bad. It's too bad that these issues exist even in the first place. Like I don't understand why we keep having to drag our opinions into stuff like this when we can just get along and code cool shit.
Yeah, I mean that was
That's
the
just
real
way
point
it
that
is.
I saw, which is like I know people. I didn't want to get into the argument of like, you know,
Who's right and who's wrong. Yeah.
who's the triggered person or not, whatever. But the thing the point that is made that actually resonates is that they don't care about, like, people who've been kernel devs for a long time, right? They don't like, they meet up, like, I know there's conferences, but most people make their contributions. They don't necessarily know who they're working with. They might know their GitHub, but they're not like know their political beliefs. They don't give a shit about that. The only thing they actually care about is whether or not their code fixes the kernel or adds a feature that is needed, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like in that kind of world, there's no bullshit. It's just like you put up or shut up. Like you either make something that works or you don't. And
That's
so
really
I feel like that I see their anger, but I also understand where the code of conduct is coming from because of the notorious like flaming that happens on the mailing list. But it also is the biggest open source project in the world, so I can see why there would be some sort of flaming going on. So it's tough. I can see both sides, but what sucks is that it could result in people literally just imagine if somebody who writes any sort of like kernel security stuff just bounces and then just like there's just no ASLR just does not work anymore, like stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if anybody doesn't know at this point that our power grid, all of our critical infrastructure relies on all this stuff. Like it's not a small deal. This is, depending on what they can actually accomplish, like pulling code wise, this could really have a lot of big problems.
This isn't a bad time to mention the ICS villages in DC tomorrow and Thursday, just to talk about the grid's security for Hack the Capitol. Them and Dragos, if I ain't mistaken.
So are you guys going to try and address all of the social issues that exist in the world to make everybody happy? So there's some problems apparently that needs to be done.
No, I think they're focusing on the IT, OT, more physical aspect side, but there's a little bit of that in there too, I'm sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, just code of conduct. Like the number one national security defense we can have in the cyber domain is a code of conduct, because our enemies respect codes of conduct.
Yeah, for real.
And social justice is really the number one thing in warfare is social justice. So feelings are important, and our enemy absolutely. If we don't spell it out in a code of conduct, they're not going to play by our rules.
It's too bad that it's such an easy target to make fun of because it is kind of ridiculous in a way. But at the same time, there's people that are trying to do they're trying to do something with the right thing in mind, right? Like they think that they're doing the best thing that they should be doing, but it's the ramifications of it, I think, are maybe not fully thought out.
But we have seen in kernel comments and stuff like that, there was Nazi, racist comments and stuff that were pulled. The comments themselves were pulled, but the code stayed.
Right. Pull the comments because the code. I'm not advocating for it. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of Nazis at all. If you've ever interacted with me, but it's pull that bullshit out and keep it out.
I mean, I find some of this comes from like it's just I don't want to like generation war or anything on young people, but a lot of young people come out of like institutionalized learning and work environments where there's always there's always the man that you can complain to. And then you come into open source where there's no particular boss that you can escalate complaints to. And like Linux kernel world, who's the boss of that? Like, is it Linus himself? Well, de facto, he becomes kind of the boss character, and people escalate stuff to him, social justice issues, complain about really mundane stuff, and he's totally not the boss at all, like except ideologically, I guess.
And sometimes
people try to enforce like these codes of conduct. You know, there's some kind of authority that will punish you if you don't obey these rules, and it doesn't kind of work in like open source communities where like leaderless. It's kind of like trying to find the head of Anonymous to complain about something that Anonymous is doing.
But if you think as well, like
it's too bad.
Sorry,
we gotta move forward as a fucking society, and instead of getting our feelings hurt at everything, and we gotta stop trying to hurt each other's feelings too, because it's both issues.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at some comments from Linus on the mailing list, where he's said straight out, he called Spender and GRSec. He called them a pack of clowns. How do you think clowns feel?
Oh, come on. Yeah, I get you. you
Like
have to take it to a
Australians?
mild level. You know, I have a heavy feeling in my heart for clowns, and you bring it there every time. Can't we just code? Like,
Check your text messages, man.
Oh God. Okay.
So yeah, another bug slash vuln slash shit show is this new Firefox browser bug that causes crashes on Windows, Mac, and Linux. That was released by who's this? Crap, what is his name? Hadoop. But yeah, if you see in the show notes, you can see the article. Basically, it's a script that generates a file that has a very long file name, and it tries to download once every 1 millisecond, and therefore it floods the inter-process communication between Firefox's processes, and it just makes the browser explode.
Makes you wonder who thought this was a good idea at 1 millisecond, honestly.
Well, I mean, that's something that no one's ever probably thought of, or people have, but they're just like, oh, no one's going to do this because this is stupid, but then you don't realize that it's actually just local DOS that should be considered.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, though, that in various scenarios where taking advantage of that IPC causes the actual machine to have issues. So does it maybe that is leaning towards a further bug in spamming IPC? I don't know.
Maybe it's just crashing every 1 millisecond because it's throwing it at the log file we were talking about earlier.
Well,
just kidding.
Those are all the platforms though, where just anything with a long file name and very fast stuff is the source of race conditions and other random things that might destroy a browser. Yeah, play with that. There's actually, I think, did you release the POC? I mean, I'm sure you can build it yourself. It tells you how to do it. Yeah, have fun, kids. The next one is the Windows 0 Day that affects all versions of Windows. This was released by, was this the one that was released by, Trend Micro, and they released a POC, which is in our show notes.
CDI one? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a JET database file that is basically like a buffer overflow that can cause an out-of-balance memory write and lead to RCE. So, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? It affects all versions of Windows that are currently supported.
It's pretty large amount of Windows.
Pretty disgusting that they didn't remediate it within 120 days.
Yeah,
to be honest, you'd think that'd be high up on the list of development, but
yeah, they have a 120-day deadline, and they didn't patch it after that deadline, and so they just released it because they could.
So this looks like kind of the POC looks like something that we could embed into a JPEG and dump into a Discord. Like, we've seen that.
Well, actually, you wouldn't do it on Snapchat because you don't. But yeah, either way, there's a lot of different payloads that you could do it on, and Word is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
because that would be loaded actually in a local file cache on your computer. So
I wonder, is there a full list of products where Jet resides?
Well, it's the affected products listed is just all current versions of Windows. So like Windows 7,
Yeah.
and then all the servers from 2008 to 2016.
If only we had if only Windows was open source, we could answer that question. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
Yo, Microsoft own GitHub. Windows will be open source like as soon as it's the year of the Linux desktop.
Didn't they open source a decent portion of it though?
Don't tell jokes like that.
I mean, we half joke, but I run Bash on Windows 10 all the time and SSH directly from. I mean, realistically, there's not a whole lot of difference these days with headless Docker Win 10 servers and stuff. I didn't think it would happen in my lifetime, but I have to say they seem to be embracing open source a little bit. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Bash on Windows too. It's been a lifesaver instead of having to use PuTTY all the time.
Well, yeah. I mean, you young guys never had to use Cygwin back in the day, but people used to make fun of me for using Cygwin on Windows, and now everybody's using a version of Cygwin.
I saw that shit still upcoming, like probably no more than a year ago. I saw people still using that. It's funny, man.
Cygwin was like my lifesaver back then. It was like, yes, I have no idea where this click button is, but I have a bash shell. Give me that.
Yep. Right click bash shell here anywhere in Windows, and it just blows like Linux hackers' minds that you can do that. It's fun.
Linux hackers. Sorry, I just really felt like saying that.
We saw your cereal earlier. I know why.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Gotta tweet that out.
So the next bug that we got here is the thousands of WordPress sites that were backdoored with malicious code.
Keeps happening over and over again.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, can we just can we put WordPress in like the struts category and the Flash category?
Absolutely.
Yeah, basically.
So, I mean, basically, they were backdoored, these sites. There's actually a Google dork that you can read to actually see. There's like a. Actually, Shell, were you the one who found this in the string from charcode, that search engine for it?
Yeah, it's the public www search or something like that.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Did you guys work that out on Discord or on IRC?
Huh?
Did you say yeah?
Wait, hold on, I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
Oh, did you guys work this out on Discord or the IRC?
The
like
database?
working through finding the strings.
Oh yeah, Shell had posted it on Twitter, I think, and then we were talking about it in here, I believe. But yeah, either way, it was just a way to like search for specific types of strings, like string from charcode in the source code of a page.
Yeah, I guess the only reason I was bringing it up is just to remind people that like we do actually have a pretty active Discord that we do fun stuff. We do some fun stuff from time to time, so check it out.
Yeah, if you look at our Twitter, you'll see in our bio that there is a link to our Discord. And one day when we level up and become Discord partners, we'll have a really cool URL.
It's fun to see exploits get written. I think one of my favorite parts was the everybody's just pounding out ideas. It's great.
Good stuff. I love it. Also, yeah, we had. Oh, I meant to say too. I was going to shout out Zaire in the podcast because Zaire found a precious bug in Wish, our lovely bot, started by Jin and I maintained. Yeah, so we haven't found a bug in a while, and somebody finally found one after months of everybody hitting it with everything they got.
Nice.
So come in, and if you guys do also want to try to hit our bots, you totally can.
Yeah.
Want to battle hard in them.
Nice.
So yeah, the next story that we have here is in the breaches and attacks category, and this is a brewery that became victim of a ransomware attack via a job vacancy ad. So they had posted about a job, and somebody just sent them ransomware in a PDF.
This just
Oh
pisses me
no,
off.
they got ransomed.
So ridiculous.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
Kind of funny too.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know we all deal with like dumb people at some point, but this is like another reason to just do training and like suspicious or phishing, phishing campaigns, for instance, are damn good to do for this very reason.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I've always thought about this as a vector, but I've never whenever I've been looking for a job, I don't want to piss them off or go to jail. Because $13,000, if you got the job, you probably make more money than the $13,000 ransom. So I don't know.
Yeah, are you talking about not wanting to send them PDFs though, or?
Well, no, I'm just saying in general because there's so many job posting engines that are old and buggy, and sometimes screw them up. Or you can also just upload your ransomware PDF up to there, and it'll just get sent to hundreds of recruiters.
That's too bad. Yeah. Was it for a security role, by the way, or do we know?
No, I don't think so. But that would be
the ultimate irony.
That'd be awful. That's actually, I don't know. That's I think you automatically get a C lowercase l SSP cert if you do this. So
I think like with like I don't know about you guys. On my CV, I have my blog. I have links to my GitHub and stuff like that. I don't see like even if you did put a malicious link in there, hey, check out my website, like something just to know that this job that you applied for, they did actually hit your link. If you put a specific link for every time you sent your CV out, be like who is actually looking at your CV and from where.
Guys, on a related note, the brewery was looking for a credit controller with the ability to use Microsoft Office, including Excel and Word, to a good level.
Well, obviously they could. So that's weird too, though. You bring in like third party recruitment solutions or applications too, and that's a whole other story as far as how stuff's exploited and executed.
But it sounded like it sounds like not only did they first of all get owned by that exact thing, like something in a malicious Excel or spreadsheet or whatever, but they're also tracking credit cards in the Microsoft documents. What? Please.
Yes.
Spreadsheet formulas, bro.
Where else do you put them?
In the text file.
Yeah, the next story that we have here is pretty concerning for anybody who buys computer parts on newegg. I don't do that, but they have had the same sort of payment data stealing malware as Ticketmaster and British Airways, which we've reported on in the past months. And so since August 16th, I believe, or August 13th or 16th, yeah, they have been having all of their data get skimmed.
This is all related then, right? Because isn't that the exact same time frame for British Airlines?
Yeah, I think they're attributing it to the same people because they basically what they did was they just did some they did like a post function to neweggstats.com, and so it looked like it's the Newegg site or something. neweggstats.com/global data, and it just takes all the credit card information and sends it over to there.
Wow.
I mean, the way that actual post is written, that if you look at where it's bound to mouse up and touch end, that payload looks almost identical to the other one. So if you could attribute when that was injected onto the site, onto the multiple sites before they were made public, then I guess you could say that's the same.
The first point is how is it exploited, and it's on a 2008 stack, and that would make you makes you question how far Newegg really wants to go with their business strategy and what they're doing infrastructure wise, because that's some old ass shit. And to be honest, if you're gonna sit there and try to compare with like Amazon, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Where's your money going? And then I don't know, just buy stuff off Tiger Direct, I guess, guys.
It's weird too because Newegg is, when I think of buying parts online, I usually actually do kind of think of Newegg as being one of the top providers.
Yeah, you at least got to cross check them for sure. I hear you.
Do you guys have Alibaba for all your part needs?
Well, soon enough, right? Aren't a lot of these tied to Magneto or Magnet or there's
Denso?
yeah? Do
I
you
can
think
say
they're tied to
Magneto
that?
too. I don't know if that's specifically what this one was for. It didn't say that in the article, but that was part of some of the other ones that were targeted.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
It'll be interesting to see what ends up being the main tie.
I mean, I think if they were using Magento as their store, their money's probably going into making that bitch scale because it doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't scale. Oh, interesting.
It doesn't scale at all. It's a horrible PHP bloatware. It's the WordPress it's like the Joomla of online stores, I guess.
Nice.
The next part of our show notes that we have, we're actually breezing through these pretty fast. It was awesome. The next story that we have is the operator of Scan4U, malware scanning service, is being jailed for 14 years.
Holy crap!
So what was he doing?
So it's basically like VirusTotal. So for those of you who do not know VirusTotal, you can upload files and it will scan across multiple different virus scanners, and you can tell if something has been flagged before for malware. So it's useful if you are trying to determine if your PDFs from whoever to your brewery are or have a backdoor in them. Yeah, we'll scan it. But so this person ran one for malware authors because once you post a VirusTotal, you take a huge chance of either it gets flagged or it doesn't. But if it does get flagged, then all of your hard work in making your malware is now a signature that means you have to completely redo your code or refactor their payloads to make it not get scanned again. So it's difficult. So this person was running a service that would be able to, or that would allow people to run or do something similar to VirusTotal, but it wouldn't get logged in the same way.
Yeah, as far as I saw, it was literally just VirusTotal, but branded and marketed to criminals, and that it's a really cautionary tale, man. Do not fucking market anything to criminals, even if it's like,
Well, ThugCrowd.
Yeah, well, ThugCrowd doesn't necessarily mean crime, but if we called this crime crowd, and then started giving ideas out, you bet your ass we would be probably targets of actual investigations. You can't do shit like that. Like, words matter in that context for sure. If he had just marketed it as a alternative to VirusTotal, and then there was wink, wink, nudge, nudge stuff going on in the background, I bet you this case wouldn't even exist. But you can't just market it as, hey, I'm going to help you design good malware, because you're going to get 14 years in fucking jail apparently.
Damn.
So was he actually doing anything with the uploads, or he was just?
I don't know. It sounds like they're making an example out of him either way, though.
Yeah, because he's just described as a Latvian non-citizen, so I guess that means he doesn't have a whole bunch of rights or anything. I mean, I'm not big on Latvian law, but I assume that there's not a great deal around cybercrime.
No, I am not exactly sure of the full details. It would actually be a nice court case to actually read. But I mean, and Flatspot's got it in the chat. All the U.S. court never charged bonders with direct involvement in hacking. Court documents show that he used malware to rob online users and trick them into buying antivirus services. So it sounds like he was getting high on his own supply in a way.
Yeah, there definitely has to be more to it because it ran from 2009 to 2016. So, I mean, you would think by that's right. By like 2010, you'd be like, well, 2011, you'd be like, I'm untouchable. Nothing I'm doing is wrong, right?
Yeah.
I think it kind of falls into like the aiding and abetting category. It says, according to Justice Department press release, Scan4U customers use the service to steal millions of payment cards from retail stores, including the United States, alleged to some $20.5 billion in losses.
Man, I'll tell you though, if he had not marketed it towards crime, it would potentially not have gotten to this level. But if he was doing all that, then I guess I gotta scale my comments back a little bit. Looks like he was
Yeah,
doing plenty to get his own attention.
Yeah, I think the last charge on there that Flatspot's pasted as well, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Sorry, after that, the computer intrusion with intent to cause damage is the one. So if he's got, the conspiracy thing is one thing, but he's got straight up intrusion charges on there as well. So
Yeah.
he obviously did some dirt, and that was
Well,
it.
he was probably getting all this fucking great zero today coming through his thing. He had just access to strictly O days coming through. O days for days.
And not to mention, like, if you run something like this, you probably also, like, it's safe to say you probably also write the shit in your spare time, right? Like,
yeah, good point.
Yeah, you don't learn about malware from reading blog posts, that's for sure.
Oops, sorry, I was grabbing a drink here. So the last
drink?
A soda.
Oh, okay.
It's very accusatory. What are you drinking?
So yeah, the last story that we have here is the Mirai botnet creators were praised for helping the FBI and now won't serve any prison time.
Praised.
So this is interesting. I mean, because this is the kind of thing that we talk about, people talk about all the time, where they say that there are two ways into InfoSec, which is one going through the sort of white hat route, and the other is going to jail and getting then served as then getting using that notoriety to get a position in computer security, so long as you don't use your powers for good, basically. It's like the whole adage that has been discussed many times by people. And so this is interesting from that perspective, but at the same time, Mirai was was fucking huge, and people have since they released their code, people have been using it worldwide for all sorts of different things, and it's, I don't know, interesting. I don't know what you guys think.
It's a game changer for sure. Like that code, definitely changed. Well, the attacks first of all changed the landscape, but releasing that code publicly definitely, in my opinion, it actually helped in the long run to secure IoT, or at least bring IoT security to the forefront. But it made a lot of noise, and when you make a lot of noise, you get a lot of eyes looking at you.
Yeah, have you guys been through that, like, attack or like CTFs that mock Mirai? Because it's pretty interesting, honestly. Like, it might be basic as all fuck, but like it's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's not basic. It's pretty complex. I like it. I've been actually
I mean,
lately.
I think it's kind of bullshit though that they're not doing any, like, no jail time at all, like just straight roll over snitch, like plea deal, no jail time. I mean, that's kind of weak considering the impact it had.
It doesn't give a good image to defense, like as far as a structure or.
One of the things that was hard coded right into there, though, was protections against not attacking U.S. critical infrastructure, like not attacking the postal service, things like
pretty
that.
good, pretty clear evidence that the developers of the botnet were collaborating with law enforcement for quite some time.
I would agree.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
and it seems their motivations weren't purely financial. At least when they started, it seems they maybe were a lot more successful than they expected they would be.
Yeah.
And then, holy shit, we got a massive botnet now. We thought we'd have like 1,000 boxes. We got 100,000 boxes.
Right.
What the fuck do we do now? I hope that's what happened. Like, I hope they were just kids fucking around and they had no later motive for like selling it as Lizard Stressor 2 or anything like that.
Or
but we don't know. I mean, it seems that they cooperated and they're getting a slap on the wrist, and there may be some other people that capitalized on this botnet later on. Maybe they'll get in worse trouble because of financial damage they caused. I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely the thing. Like, there's the other variants and people building for straight up crime. Because if you look at the sort of communities around it, the people who are just straight up, taking other people's code, making crime out of other people's code, profiting off it, and then don't really know how it works. They're the kind of, I guess that's where the big
like a lot of us
to come in.
In this chat, we often will set up like a honey pot device of some sort or a proxy or whatever. And we start realizing very quickly, holy shit, we could embed like a crypto miner or a JavaScript, command and control, like a beefhook or WebSocket backdoor in every one of these requests. And we realize very quickly we can amass like a botnet, like 50,000 nodes immediately. But we don't step over that line. Like that's kind of the ethics test is, can you do it? Can you prove you can do it? And now what do you do with this power? And that kind of determines what happens next when it comes to law enforcement. That decision you make.
Just a thought experiment on what you just said. So let's say you do that and it is way more successful than what you think. What do? Do you just back out and move away? Yeah.
That's I mean, we all just have to play it by ear because it's all, it's groundbreaking. Sometimes there's no laws against what we're doing. There's no precedents.
Yeah, it's like when you make a Twitter post and you don't know how far it's going to go, and then it goes way too fucking far, and you're like, what the fuck did I do? It happens.
Yeah, a little more serious than that when it comes down to like national security and stuff. But yeah, you're right. There is like an ethics test, and I guess law enforcement. Well, it's not really law enforcement's job, but somebody at some point has to decide what did this kid do with his potential once he discovered that he had this potential. And that's the ethics test. That's where they figure out. Service. Right. Well, I don't know if any of the particular Mirai authors did that, or if that was like.
No, they did. Or are you saying did they put him in after the fact for the forum post?
It's like one of the spooky boys says, "Hey, could you add this bit of code into your stupid botnet?" And I go, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, I mean, if you're looking
but
at
they just
like
credential reuse.
What's that?
Like I was about to say, like it's just like you think about it. It's like if you want to like avoid detection, right? Like you're like, okay, what don't I hit? And you're like, oh yeah, the U.S. government. Like that's a good place.
That's true. I mean, there's a lot of botnets that have got, and in fact, they share these amongst different malware families where they have like pretty standard actually to have like a host file of IPs that you just don't execute on and you don't talk to because they're known sandboxes or anti-malware AV companies, that kind of stuff. So it's possible they just cut and paste this from somewhere. Don't target these IP blocks because that's how you get your botnet caught quickly, sinkholed. So they do share these kind of lists among each other. So it could be there could be no ulterior motive there other than just cut and paste of a list of IPs that it's probably not a good idea to DDoS or scam if you want to keep under the radar.
No, absolutely. But it's just I still think it's interesting that they don't get any jail time and they just helped to basically clean up their own mess because it talks about they were helping mitigate attacks on the Memcached servers when that was happening, and like they, I guess it's one of those things though where the people who run the DDoS mitigation services are actually just DDoSers who advise people how to get DDoS.
Most of the bulletproof hosting guys are like spammers or have some kind of black hat shit going on in the background. That's why they have the facilities.
Yeah. So
use Akamai, bro. It's expensive as fuck, but it's worth.
But I think we should still take this like caution. If you are thinking about building a botnet, even with the best of intentions, like don't expect to get away with no jail time if you do get caught. Like it's not. Yeah. This case isn't certain. Like it might not be a one-off, but this is not the common sort of.
Yeah, definitely. Especially for people who do botnet stuff, like where it's people who do it with, I guess, more criminal intent for extortion purposes, Squad and some of the other people that we have talked about. Those kind of people are the ones who get jail time because they have actual criminal intent behind them. Whereas literally like the Mirai one was literally like Minecraft and like anime stuff, like they're fighting online. So it just, I feel like that's one of the differentiating factors that might have been part of this.
And it would be so cool to get somebody on that was working on the case, or even the guys that are on it, and see what they can talk about.
It could be the. I'm hoping that law enforcement in the US has taken a leaf out of the book that we use here in Australia, and I think a little bit in the UK, where feds will actually sit down with the perps and their parents in their living room and have a friendly cup of coffee and a chat about what the implications are if we take this any further, and is there some way we can make this work? And it works. Like law enforcement sits down and says, here are the consequences. Here's the alternatives. And you can have a very bright career in InfoSec, and we can help you with that if you help us clean up this little mess that you've made.
Yeah, I think as long as you're picturing a lot of guns pointed at you while they're saying these things,
well,
yeah,
maybe
that's
they
pretty
don't do.
much
Maybe,
exactly
hopefully, maybe they don't do that. Like they don't do that here in Australia. They don't come in with guns blazing. It's some nice gentlemen in DEFCON t-shirts show up and say, "Hi, we used to be just like you.
I hope so. I hope
now we catch guys like you, and we're watching. So, do you want to be like us, or do you want to go the other way?"
you want to be in jail.
And they give them that opportunity, and I hope that's what's happened here. And if so, that's a really positive thing.
Yep, I would agree. I hope it is. I hope it is.
Can we move on talk-wise? I want to get on to this why I'm done with Google Chrome that's hosted on WordPress post.
Yeah, this is our Goodreads section. So we don't really have to go over too much of it, but if you have something you want to talk about with it, absolutely. I did want to touch on real quick the first article in Goodreads in our show notes, which anybody is joined and did not see it before, I will post
ThugCrowd.com.
Yep.
But we'll also post the link up.
Yep, I just posted it in the chat there. So the first thing here, this is something that somebody finally summed it up in a way that I feel makes sense and I can just share to people, is this software disenchantment post that's basically about why stuff is bloated and ultimately why stuff is insecure and doesn't work the way that we would anticipate it to work with all the technology that we have. And it just goes through a breakdown of just everything about software today and why things like why Chrome takes up so much memory and things like that, just like, and why the Android base image is like 6 gigabytes instead of like 30 megabytes that Windows 95 used, so just there's so many interesting points in here that I implore people to read because I've really liked making things really small and optimized, and so this is something that really resonated with me, and I don't know if anybody else here touches on with them, but I implore you to read it.
It does. It gives you a hell of a good standing as far as what's running and when it shouldn't be and what caching can do. And it's like an awesome full stack post. Windows 10 takes 30 minutes to update. What do you think it's doing in 30 minutes? Probably sending out your personal information back to base.
Exactly. And it's saying, yeah, you could like, oh yeah, why does it take like an hour, 30 minutes to update when you can install that on a new disk in the same amount of time, multiple times? So. But yeah, would you want to talk about Zuff with the Chrome thing?
I was just laughing. I was laughing that honestly this person posted this from a WordPress blog, and you can honestly tell just because you hit it in the fave icon is a WordPress logo sitting up in the top. But other than that, there's quite a few remediation workarounds for this, and the simplest thing I found is just doing a GPO for registry entries.
Wait.
You can set a couple things.
What are you talking about?
Sorry. Why I'm leaving Chrome. Post from this guy talking about this week. I think he's talking about Chrome Sync specifically.
Oh, right. Okay. So, yeah, he was like, there were some new features and stuff that came out.
Yeah, there's Sync, which I guess signs you in. If you sign in through any kind of Google application, from what I understand, it also syncs back and forth to devices. There's a flag that disables it. There's also registry key entries that you can do to remediate it on an enterprise level for GPO. So
isn't this the one that he cleared his cache and then it said, don't worry, your Google sessions will all be fine because we're deleting all your cookies except for your Google cookies. Yeah. Okay, I saw the screenshot.
But is this also, maybe I read it wrong, but is there a feature where when you sign into the Google service, it also signs you into the browser? So you sign into Gmail and then your browser signs in alongside it?
Yeah, right.
Is that?
No, that's how it works. That's how it works. If you sign into a Google application, it's also going to sign you into Chrome at this point going forward.
Yeah, well, what if I'm at a like a PC cafe or whatever? I don't know. Do they even exist? if I'm using someone else's machine and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna log into my Gmail.
You're not going to use someone else's machine. Your DNS.
It already remembers. Like you log into some Google account in a shared Chrome that isn't like most internet cafes will reset and delete in theory your profiles when they restart, but they don't often. And you'll quite often, if you're at a library or something, a public computer, you'll see like 100 accounts of people that have signed in, showing that at least Google has remembered part of
I
that.
can make a living in a library, is what he just told me. God damn, what am I doing with my life?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want to hang out with like homeless people masturbating and stuff, go for it. But
That's literally what I was thinking about.
That's my favorite pastime, dude.
Hi, Lady Cracker.
I see. What's up, Lady Cracker?
You on the West Coast or East Coast? Coming through loud and clear.
You guys hear me?
I can hear it. It's not music, but I can hear you.
Well, he might not be able to hear us though.
I can hear you guys just fine.
Oh, cool.
All right,
dude.
Oh, I can hear you now too. Hey.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, you sound good. Yeah. You have any comments on our story so far?
No, I'm just just listening to your guys' voice, jerking off.
You watching the DVD thing?
The what thing?
The DVD scroller on the stream. We have a DVD background for screensaver for a DVD player.
Like on Twitch or something?
Yeah. It's just going.
I'm not in the Twitch matrix right now.
No problem. Okay, so yeah, there's a bunch of other good reads. If anybody here wants to check them out, definitely do so. And also, I wish Skellset could be here right now because he found. I wanted to explain this bug that he found in Windows. It went from like one thing to a million things. So, but we'll have to get him on here at some point to talk about it. Yeah. So I guess we can start moving on to our topic of the week, which is hacking like a journalist with nodyaH.
Let's do it.
Hey.
So what's up, nodyaH?
Same stuff, different day.
I hear that.
I actually gave a hack like a journalist talk at the local Houston Anonymous Hackers Association. So shout out to them. This will be the second time I've talked about it, and we're becoming increasingly efficient at it. So
right on.
Awesome.
So just for people that aren't familiar, are you a journalist with a specific place? What's your background?
My background is in newspapers because I was really interested in writing even as a young adult. And I was like, well, I want to make a living from writing. So let's get into newspapers, not knowing at the time what was going to happen. Since then, I've moved into booming industry until about 2006 when Craigslist came into effect and just destroyed the personal ad.
Yeah.
So since that time, I've gone on to moving into more business news, subscription-based news services, which a lot of writers have, and of course other journalists have gone into PR and other more lucrative assets. So when I say industry news, I cover stuff that's happening in Houston, whether it be energy, oil, gas, petrochemicals, stuff like that. And then at night, I also do whatever kind of culture stuff I want for Dead Dialect. So shout out to them as well, and that sort of keeps me balanced, as it were.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, so hacking like a journalist, I can jump right in, or if you guys have any questions, we can go from there.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to just let you take it because you had said that you were doing talks about this, so I wanted to let you kind of have the floor for a while, and then if we have any questions, we can start asking you.
Sure. Yeah. Just jump right in whenever, and I'll start us off. The main thing that I could start off by saying is it took me a while to realize there's a lot of similarities between journalists and hackers. Primarily the fact that we get a lot of similar results on Google's search engine results page. If you just say reporters are blank or hackers are blank, you'll notice a lot of 4-letter words that are the same.
Interesting.
Because people love journalism stories and they love hacking stories unless those stories are about something that they like that is being crapped on. And that tends to happen a bit. So it really just depends on, who you're taking off that day. And other than that, there's just a lot that we have in common in terms of pay, working hours, turnover, unexpected problems. What else? Living off of vending machine food, stuff like that. There's a few other similarities as well because both groups are part of a certain regard to society. There's this saying for journalism that is the fourth estate. The first and second and third estates are like clergy, noble people, military. The fourth estate was journalism, in that the press was seen as a entity that was helping keep the public and the government at a good regard for each other in terms of awareness. And so the fifth estate, as I'm sure you guys are aware, is becoming this new form, which is information and press that has been gained from leaks, from hacks, from cables that have been, given out and declassified illegally. And there's a lot of ongoing debate about whether that's legitimate or not. And that's part of the part of what my talk centers around, is whether or not it's okay for a journalist to do certain things that a hacker would. And of course, then we delve into, whether you're an ethical hacker, an unethical hacker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It's
Okay,
the
so yeah,
medium that you're sharing too, right? Like you're on the same mediums that I think hackers and infosec professionals find themselves on, like Twitter and staying well connected to groups, right?
And I could go into the intricacies of social media for hours on end, but obviously Twitter was accidentally built for journalists. I mean, Arab Spring is probably the best example of how something broke on Twitter. Like news broke on Twitter first, and then everybody else started using Twitter screen caps to, show the narrative.
That's absolutely. Great.
Over, say, Facebook.
Nice.
Yeah. No, that's a huge thing. But you're saying, though, specifically about the ethics of this, which I know that I'll let you get into, but it's a really good point about, is it ethical for journalists to use information that was given to them by somebody who got it by criminal means?
And it goes without saying, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, the two best examples, right?
Yeah.
I have one example that I think is really interesting, and that was the Sun, I think, where they did phone hacking.
Yeah, the voicemail hacking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So if you can touch on that a little bit too, I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. But yeah.
Well, the thing is that if a journalist does it, they're breaking the law. If they get it from somebody else, technically they're not breaking the law, but then that's not going to stop the government or some representative from coming into the offices and saying, we need to confiscate whatever it was they sent you, or we need to confiscate your servers, we need to confiscate your laptops, we need to confiscate these documents. And so
are they able to do that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's what happened with Glenn Greenwald when Snowden sent him because Greenwald went and met up with Snowden because Snowden was extremely worried about whether he could even successfully deliver the goods. And he had a hard time just getting in contact with Greenwald because he was trying to tell Glenn Greenwald, hey, would you mind, using this encryption method so that I could communicate with you? You have a lot of people who would probably be really interested in talking to you, but you're not using any form of encryption. And so that probably makes it difficult for you to get stories. And this was in 2013?
Yeah.
And back then, no journalist was using mass encryption. It wasn't the norm. Maybe with the exception of Ars Technica or motherboard reporters or investigative journalists who are, on the cutting edge. Now everybody's using Signal.
I had no idea that there was a gap there. That's really interesting.
Yeah. But no, when it comes to like news of the world and all that, it's a bit different because they weren't being given stuff. They were engaging in it. So it's the difference between, it's the difference between did you engage in this yourself, in which case you're going to have a harder time in court, or did you simply receive information that somebody else gave you and they broke the law?
Right.
But regardless, at the end of the day, you're probably going to get one of those visits from the authorities, and maybe it'll involve a happy conversation over a table with some coffee, or maybe it'll involve firearms. Who knows?
Have you ever had that happen? And what kind of?
Oh no, not me.
No?
I'm very street level. I
didn't mean to admit any crimes, of course. It's all fake anyways.
Yeah. I could say with regards to direct applications for what I've used various techniques for, and we can go into some of the more rudimentary techniques that are applicable for journalism and vice versa.
Yeah, sounds good.
My best example that I've given in my previous little talk, I was a student reporter for a daily newspaper here in Houston, the Houston Chronicle. And around Christmas in 2012, the Sandy Hook shooting happened. Now, everybody was basically paying attention to that and taking care of it. And there was breaking news after breaking news. And we were all, everybody was keeping their eye on Facebook, on Twitter. We had the AP news feeds that were directly being fed to us through our typical methods. But I just happened to be browsing on on 4chan. And someone happened to upload a picture of the mugshot everybody was using for the shooter. And they're like, oh, wow, this guy has the same name, Lanza. He's actually some other dude who just happens to have the same name. And everybody jumped on Facebook and took his profile shot. And now this poor innocent soul is being, all blasted all over CNN. And so I saw that and I saved it and I emailed it over to my boss and I was like, hey, editor, we're using this mugshot. I'm not sure if it's legit. And they double checked and then they asked another editor and they're like, oh yeah, this is wrong. We need to pull this. And not only did the Houston Chronicle pulled it, every other paper under Horse Corp, they sent the heads up out. And then, I wasn't the only one that found that out. There's probably a couple other people at the same time around the country who were figuring out that was the wrong mugshot. But if I hadn't been browsing on B at my internship, I wouldn't have found that out. And so that gave me props and they're like, hey, good job. And so I was like, hey, can I save this email where you said good job in case I wanted to use it as an example in a future job opportunity where I could prove that I know what I'm doing? They're like, yeah. Hey, by the way, how'd you find out about that? And I was like, internet.
I just happened to look at it. I don't look at it.
Yeah, but I use that as an example of how, even something as rudimentary as just keeping your eye on threads that are quickly updating on local subreddit, on any of the chans, on, just very obscure places can lead to great leads.
I think it's a lot of times what's going to get you that scoop is having all these background things that you've accrued over the years and then just watching, and all of a sudden that one little thing will pop out.
Oh yeah,
and save the day as it was in that case. And just so real quick on normal newsrooms, there's a thing that actually is known as the wire, right? Or similar.
Yeah, and there's a AP wire. There's various other wires, but AP is probably what I would argue the standard in the U.S.
And it's for lack of a better term, it's a stream of data. Like, how does that actually work?
So there is I wouldn't call it a subscription method because you can't subscribe to it if you're not in the business of news. But newspapers, news agencies can get access to it, and it's not like it's in the future or anything like that. It's simply ongoing stories that are being constantly updated, and most of them have embargoes to let you know, hey, we're not done writing this up. You can look at this, but you can't publish it yet because it's not complete. And it's basically just making sure that everybody's getting everything ready that they need to, whether it be text-based information, photographs that are constantly being updated, things of that nature. And they will have layers on top of layers in terms of what's been updated over and over because, as everyone knows, stories change very rapidly, especially breaking news.
That's interesting. Yeah, I had no idea that there is that crossover too. But yeah, the hacking and journalist mindset, it's pretty prevalent for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that specific thing that you're talking about with the wrong mugshot is the same thing that happened with the Boston marathon bombings too. On Reddit, and people had falsely identified people based on surveillance footage and things. And it continually happens now. It's like a regular prank that what's his face, Sam Hyde is.
Right.
Oh right. Yeah, every single time.
So do newsrooms know about these memes to a certain extent? I would imagine they do, right?
People who are acquainted with the internet, who spend a lot of time on the internet. So I'm not trying to be discriminatory, but obviously younger reporters will be more up and up on memes and things of that nature. Older reporters too, if they're interested in that sort of thing. But if you took, Joe the reporter, who's 35 and he's married and he has 2 kids, he just doesn't have time to be keeping up with memes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
he does his job, and
It sounds like that's a perfect industry where the seasoned vets are just as important as the noobs or even the interns, where the interns can go, "Hey, wait a minute, that is Sam Hyde. We're
You're
not going to
right.
publish him because he's a meme. Let's
Yeah.
move on." That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, and so basically, to give my crash course of hacking like a journalist, and what I usually preface this with is, if you want to hack like a broke journalist, because for quite some time I was freelancing and basically using the tools that were free to download. I start off by saying, well, let me put it to you this way. A lot of people ask me, they say, "Oh, what news do you subscribe to? What do you read?" And the fact of the matter is, you have to read as much as you can, and you don't get to pick and choose. Oh, well, I like Fox News. Oh, well, I like CNN. Oh, well, I like NPR. You have to read every single one of them and read all their headlines and digest which ones have been changed this way or that way, from whether it's just that editor or copy editor's subtle opinions, or whether it was simply to fit it on the page. And my basic suggestion is to use three different or two main ways of doing that. My number one suggestion is, if you're not already using it, spider.today. It's this little news aggregator, spidr.today. It takes all the news, all the news stories, and blocks them into little grids. And it'll be from every single, and it's basically just a great way to get the gist of what that story is really about. Because like I said, everybody's going to either spin it on purpose or omit things just for the sake of space. It really speeds up, and it's all about that digestion. It'll come to no surprise to you guys or any of the listeners. There's so many stories out there, so much information. We have access to it around the world that you simply don't have time to read every single story. The best you can do is just churn through it, take out the chaff, and digest as best you can. So number one suggestion, make spider.today your homepage. I didn't make it. Wish I had. I'm just plugging it because it's a time saver for me. I wake up in the morning, I check that to see what I missed while I was asleep.
It's SPYDR.
Oh no, SPIDR.
Oh, okay. I've actually seen that in a few TV shows and just assumed it was like their non-brand thing in replacing like Google, right? But no, apparently it's an actual thing. That's awesome.
It's a real time saver.
Very cool.
Yeah, and my second suggestion, this is more old-fashioned now. It's almost anachronistic. It's almost obsolete. But there's a organization called Newseum. They have a physical location in New York City, if I'm not mistaken. Newseum.org has a page of the front pages from all the major newspapers around the world. A couple hundred different newspapers, if I'm not mistaken. More than 100 at least. And so that just gives me a really good snapshot of what all the major newspapers have decided is important enough to be on the front page. And so obviously there's a lot of overlap with whatever's going on with the main governments of the world. Right now, the U.S. presidential administration will show up on a lot of headlines. Stuff about the U.S.-China trade war shows up on most newspapers, stuff about tariffs. But then you can get lucky sometimes and spot gold. Especially, I like to keep my eye on what's going on with crude oil. So stuff that's going on in Alaska, stuff that's going on in North Dakota is important. And it's good to be able to see just if there's something that's major showing up in that particular city's newspaper that made it to the top of the front page. Next thing you know, you've scooped somebody else.
Awesome. That's what's kind of been your most interesting thing that you found that you gave us that one great example earlier. Have you seen anything that really just was going to go probably nowhere and stuck out either on Spider or you mentioned B2, but like Reddit? There's always something coming up on Reddit, right? Twitter.
I can give you one from this week. I love R Houston. I also keep track of all the subreddits for all the local universities. And I don't know if you guys are aware of the sex doll brothels that opened up in Canada.
What? No.
Do they reuse those?
What's their phone number? I mean,
oh, trust me. I have so many questions as well. So there was a sex doll brothel that recently opened up in Canada. Motherboard did a great story on it. It's Aura Dolls, and they already have a competitor named Kinky's Dolls. Kinky's Dolls is going to open up
what?
Kinky Stalls is going to open up a sex brothel in Houston in about a week. I found out about this because I just so happened to be browsing through Houston's subreddit. And if I hadn't found that, I wouldn't have looked it up. I wouldn't have found their phone number. I wouldn't have called them up, and I wouldn't have made a story out of it, which I'm currently trying to finish up for Dead Dialect. That was thanks to Houston sub. Yeah, and I was like, so my number one question, why Houston as their first U.S. location? And and then of course everybody has a million and plus one questions. Who's cleaning them?
God. Yes, that's what I was just thinking.
You can AIDS off these dolls, bro. Like, what's up?
Yeah,
you gotta call the
ass
article "Land of Misfit Toys."
Oh my god!
Oh no!
Toy Story.
Oh my god! It's a
Toy Story. I got a Woody right here. Go ahead and put your Buzz Lightyear in its face.
Oh my god!
Now here's the real punchline. The real punchline is apparently these are supposed to be unmanned brothels.
Oh, good. So there's nobody cleaning them. Is the answer. Nobody cleans
we
them.
speak automation here, I think, right, guys?
Jesus Christ!
I mean,
no, there's just one dude ravaging them all.
A huge aspect of cyberpunk culture is walking, talking robots, especially the ones that you can have certain relations with. And so this is a great archived example of how we are making progress towards that. And I was very interested in why they chose Houston as one of their locations. So ongoing story.
Well, you've brought my hiccups back, so I appreciate it. There they are. So I'm going to be on mute for a little bit while I try and wrap my mind around this.
Yeah, you can't archive the dolls if they're still being used. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Do they have clown varieties?
I was just going to ask.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. People, when I would tell this anecdotally to other people in networking events, socials, I was at the bar or something like that, they would ask me, oh, are there male versions? Oh, do they come like this? Oh, do they look like that? And I said, you can order one for about, $3,000 and have it look like whatever you want to, or you can rent whatever it is they have in stock for about $160 an hour, your choice.
$160 an hour?
Yeah, which leaves, 15 minutes for cuddling.
Fucking...
Oh my god! I can't.
I want to know. What happens when you ask them questions? Do they just sit there in silence and you just role play on it, or what?
I mean, if you like the strong silent type, I'm sure.
Oh my god!
You guys have been to DEF CON. I'm sure you can see that some people might need this service.
I think we're gonna.
There should be a village.
Yeah, it's a village at DEF CON.
Oh god, cyborg sex village.
Instead of a doll, just find a Fed. Cut it close.
Yeah.
Oh, this is getting horrible. Let's stop now.
This is derailed.
But yeah, I can. Let me move in right along. And of course, I like to cite Hacker News as one of my preferred ways of looking up news stories that are important to the hacker community. And that qualifies a few certain circles because cybersecurity, coding, computer news. Is cybersecurity hacking? No. Is it part of hacking? Sorta. When I am during my 9 to 5, I love covering cybersecurity and how it applies to oil and gas and various Houston industries. Not hacking per se, but it's always good to keep my eye on it. Hacker News happens to post quite a few cybersecurity stories that apply to me, so I always check that first thing in the morning. It's basically one way for me to filter news stories that are A, academic, B, well written, and C, generating a lot of interest among readers. It basically, Hacker News takes out a lot of the legwork of finding out which stories float to the top, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of good sites like that. It's interesting that you're coming at it from the perspective of your industries in Houston, like gas and oil, because there are, actual news stories that are related to that in cybersecurity as far as like industrial control system hacking. Things. So really cool that you're tying those industries together with your local news as well as with overall hacking and cybersecurity in general.
And other than that, from a business standpoint, I check out a few different news wires, and PR Newswire is one that I would somewhat recommend if you're interested in it. PR Newswire does require creating login credentials, but it takes 5 minutes to put it all together. That's just a way of churning through whichever companies are putting out press releases. A bunch of it's chaff, some of it's important. There's Business Newswire. There's there's a few other ones as well. Then I could say if you're looking for more government information, what saves me a lot of time is I'll go through PolitiFact. I'll go through well, if I'm looking for something specifically, I will always jump on the Security and Exchange Commission's SEC.gov website or the Public Access to Court Electronic Records, PACER. PACER does charge you for looking up things, but it's only about, I think, 10 cents per search, which does add up. But if you know what you're looking for, it's only, less than $1 to get where you're going. And that's mainly for anything regarding legal filings, lawsuits, things of that nature. You can successfully find out if someone who you're looking for is being sued, though, in federal court at least, through PACER. So that's just an example of how you can utilize something that was meant for lawyers for your own benefit.
And also, Hayden's a cheap date. Cheap date.
And other than that, I mean, a lot of that helps making stories work. If you're trying to create stories from scratch, like I said, obviously just jumping on Google and using its advanced keyword search. Twitter has an advanced keyword search as well. Hyperlocal subreddits always work, of course. Jumping on and if you're looking in a specific industry, obviously you're going to start going into smaller chambers and smaller bubbles of pre-existing websites. I could think of several examples, just ones that pop out from Tumblr is obviously an example, somewhat of a looking for a needle in a stack of needles these days, but people will make their own little updates and things of that nature. And then there's God, I can't believe I'm saying it, but LinkedIn has now chats and updates where people are discussing things that I can later contact them directly and say, hey, you were talking about this. Could you tell me about that? Or even, it's hard to point out because there are a lot of social media websites now tailored specifically for companies. Yammer is probably the best example I can think of. And if you don't already have credentials to log in, you're screwed. But other than that, I mean, there's still some people and companies that use pre-existing stuff like LinkedIn or not Instagram, but just various social media websites as their de facto way of communicating with each other. And you can find a lot of gold nuggets in that.
That's awesome. Yeah, so the landscape's definitely changed a lot as far as like how organizations are communicating and like disseminating information, because it's easier in a lot of cases to just do, like a tweet is like relying on people to actively check your website, for.
Oh yeah.
So that's how I get a lot of news from that. We get a lot of news because we together as a group aggregate quite a InfoSec news. And it just comes from all sorts of random sources like that. So you'll see like, posts and things to like kind of verify certain ones, but it's just interesting to see the different channels in which people can get their news from, which, yeah.
I have a question.
What's up?
I was going to ask, what are the most like successful articles that you've come across, and where have you found your sources from, and what have you been researching?
Well, a lot of that involves what I would call farming. Or harvesting in the hacker sense of the term, because really there's what I do boring wise, which is somebody sends, my editor will be like, hey, turn this press release around, which basically means here's this long legal press release with a lot of words. I'm basically distilling the good bits out, and that's just a smaller version of the press release. Or there's me writing up a story from scratch, which involves contacting companies with people who I have pre-existing relationships with. And I would love to just be able to call up the CEO or someone else from the board and talk to them directly. But of course, I end up talking to their communications director or what have you, and try to go from there. And if I'm lucky, I get to have the CEO on the phone while their coach is listening in. And as a side note, only recently have companies begun to coach people on, hey, here's what a phishing attack looks like, or a phishing attempt looks like. Oh, hackers might be out to get you through social engineering. Here's how to protect yourself against it. The coaching for politicians and CEOs on how to protect themselves from journalists has been around for decades. So I'm in a battlefield where they have been well seasoned against me.
So how often have you ever, I guess, found yourself talking to someone direct who's like exploited something or been able to give you information? How often does that ever happen, if ever?
It happens face to face at conferences when you've been able to, take the armor off a bit. Over the phone, it's a lot more sterile. It's a lot more formal. I will get great stories whenever I'm at a conference. Conferences, and to the more important part, the networking events, especially Cash Bar, after the conferences is where you get your best stories, because then everybody's loosening up their ties. Everybody is using the journalist's best tool, which is Vice. They will start whipping out their favorite cocktails and beers and cigarettes. And if you're in New Orleans or Las Vegas, they will begin hitting up the tables. And that is when you become their friend and they trust you and they will confide in you. And that's where you get your breaking stories from.
So with and when this happens, I haven't read any of your content, but is it very like technical in a sense, or do you try to translate that to non-technical people, or how does that come about? Like, what do you tend to write more towards, I guess, a general audience or someone who's more from a technical background?
9 to 5, I am writing up stories to people who are probably more expert than I am. So I don't have to do a lot of background information unless I'm keeping in mind that it is something that's going to be read by international readers, in which case I may need to, at the end of the story, after I've talked about the important bits, I'll say, this is a part of the US political system and it is important because blah, blah, blah. And that's business news for you. Your audience already knows your specific terms. They already know your jargon. You don't have to waste time. With the exception of whenever I'm writing up how, for example, blockchain is being applied to the oil and gas industry, all of a sudden I have to explain to them blockchain is a such and such decentralized ledger for such and such. And then I have to do a follow-up paragraph about cryptocurrencies are not necessarily tied to blockchain, even though tokenization. And then my next paragraph is tokenization is a blah, blah, blah. And then, it's just down the rabbit hole we go, because bankers, analysts, and buyers and traders and sellers have no idea what blockchain is. All they know is their chief information officer, their chief digital officer said, we need to create a blockchain platform. That's the extent of their knowledge. So every time I write up a story, I have about 3 paragraphs telling the reader what it is.
And what are your thoughts on blockchain and ledgers after doing so? What do you feel? What do you feel the benefits are to the core? Like, what do you see as being more secure as far as what's available now and what you can do?
Well, as it applies to the oil and gas industry, as it applies to logistics companies, distribution, transportation, it's still, I wouldn't say in its infancy, because it's been around for a decade now, more or less, but it's only recently been applied to logistics, transportation, oil and gas. And the big players have a budget and they have a risk appetite, and they are very interested in seeing if all these promises of increased security, faster exchanges in terms of business and invoices, less money spent on human labor or on intermediaries. They have the ability to pay for that and to test it out and to see if these case studies are going to come through and to see if these pilot programs work, right? So they're plenty interested. And I every time I turn my back, there's another major oil major or major company like Maersk doing an update on a pre-existing pilot program. However, smaller players are still sticking to their guns with the good old-fashioned way of conducting business with paper ledgers and your own version, your own database, and your whoever you're working with has their own version. And sometimes it doesn't add up, right? Because until there are bona fide blockchain platforms that anybody can just plug and play, that's where we are. And a lot of people are saying it's going to be another 8 to 10 years before blockchain platforms, blockchain technology integrates enough into logistics, transportation, what have you.
Yeah,
so
and
the jury's out.
And that's a topic up for debate. I mean, as far as when and where you can store PII is one thing. Definitely from government, they're fucking hungry. I can tell you that.
I mean, as an anecdote, here's my best anecdote. I won't say which conference I was at, but earlier this year I was at a conference, for various CEOs, CIOs, CFOs, and in this conference there's a whole bunch of different topics going on, but they had 4 different workshops for blockchain. And it wasn't about Bitcoin. It wasn't about cryptocurrency. It was a blockchain workshop. Every time I went to every single time with a whole different group of people from various executive leadership roles. First question was always, what about Bitcoin? They were still at that point that financial people were at in 2013, where they could not separate blockchain technology from cryptocurrencies. And we're still there right now.
They're probably asking about Bitcoin because that's what they're actually in when they shouldn't be.
Right. And honestly, at the time it was, oh God, had Bitcoin already crashed? It must have been February or March. Yeah. So
it
they
was
had a lot
crashing
of,
for sure. It's probably like 10K
yeah.
at that point.
Yeah. So just keep that context in mind.
So we got a question from the Twitch chat from Russian Cowboy Elite. What's the scariest situation you've been in as a journalist?
The scariest. I assume that's like physically scariest situation I found myself in.
I think we could go either way. I mean, maybe it was you know, you're under some sort of pressure or something from an internet scary man, or I don't know.
For me, my number one fear is corrections, and getting it right the first time is paramount to anything else. So anytime I get myself caught in a situation where I'm working remotely and all I've got is my laptop and my wits, and I'm sending 1,000 words to my editor, and they're sending me back questions I don't have the answer to, and even if I had the answer to it, or even if I had the person I needed to ask, it's basically down to the wire, and we need to figure this out ASAP. That's when I start to get a little worried about, like, do I cut the red wire or the blue wire? Do I tell them, yes, that's what that means, or no, that's not what that means? Because if I'm wrong, it's my ass. And that is far scarier than someone putting a gun to my face because I was trying to take a picture of them doing a drug deal.
And have you had a gun to your face while someone was doing a drug deal? Or?
No, not yet.
Damn.
And I'll tell you, because like one of my favorite things is riding around Houston late at night, seeing if there's any breaking news stuff to catch. So there's been no lack of opportunities. It just hasn't happened.
Of course, man. You're surrounded by rich white people. What do you expect?
You should come to Third Ward sometime.
Do you hit up the scanners though for stories?
Like you mean like police scanners and stuff like that?
Yep.
Well, I mean, there's the open one, but they flip channels for various reasons, and whenever things get escalated, so you can get lucky, but they'll use very specific channels for when shit gets real.
Gotcha. Right.
There's also the like POXAG stuff, the pager messages. I don't know if they use them.
And to be honest, I mean, back in 2013, maybe before 2015, I was hitting the streets and more interested in doing breaking news level stuff. So I would keep track. Oh, fires were the main thing to look out for, especially around 2013 when the Texas wildfires were so big because it hadn't rained in so long. Fires were happening even in the 610 loop of Houston, where it's mostly buildings. So yeah, I'd be all over the place looking for the next fire that would happen. These days, however, I'm more interested in things that are going on, culturally speaking, at events, shows, bars, artistic scenes, and things of that nature, nighttime wise. And then daytime wise, it's all about what's going on with the state of Houston's industry.
So, kind of piggybacking off the question that you were just asked about being in fear, has there been a time where you've been on a story where you can feel like there's something really big and sinister going on? Kind of, I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but kind of like just it goes deep. Like there's some kind of government stuff going on that you have to back away from.
I wouldn't say back away from. I've hit a wall a lot of times where I could tell that there is a bit of a scandal. To give you an example, when I was a student reporter, there was a situation where we had a dean of a certain department resigning, and it was unexpected, and there was a lot of gossip going around about why he was resigning. And I had another dean tell me, who was, I'd like made friends with this dean, and he was like, oh, it was a misappropriation of funds, and the guy was basically misusing this and that. And I was like, I went to that other department, and I was like, I want to talk to the dean, and they're like, no, and I was like, shit. Because like other than they weren't going to tell me, he wasn't going to talk to me, right? And I was trying everything I could within the requirements, what you're allowed to do in your capacity as a ethical journalist to do, and I just kept hitting the wall. And so the story died because too much time had passed, and it was just unfortunate because that would have been one of the times where that you would have been like not exactly recognized, but you would have felt good that student reporter breaks story on this, thing happening, this corruption. And I just hit a wall because A, inexperience, and B, if they're not going to talk about it, they're not going to talk about it. There was no database to hack. There was no email to get into. It was just the wall. And so, you got to ask yourself, how many times has that happened? A lot.
Oh, really? A lot? Well,
I mean, in terms of there's not always some clue missing that you can just uncover, and there it is. It's not it's not like some script in a movie or a video game.
Yeah. Do you find that that happens more often than not? Then it sounds like it kind of does, especially if you're playing within the boundaries. It sounds like that's unfortunately a big part of it.
Well, I mean, but that's the beauty of the blending of hacking, or I should say leaks at the very least, and where journalism is now. Because you take the Panama Papers, for example. The Panama Papers is what I would say a much better example of leaks leading towards investigative journalism that led to something else. Whereas Snowden's leaks were all these documents that Glenn Greenwald then and other journalists tore into and turned into stories. Whereas the Panama Papers was essentially a lot of breadcrumbs attached to a lot of threads, and journalists had to pull on those threads and follow those breadcrumbs, and those led to other stories. And those other stories didn't just happen overnight. There was a lot of extra legwork. There was opening up Excel databases that they were making and compiling and filtering. There was FOIA requests happening. There was all this extra work that happened because of that initial leak. And that's what usually has to happen is all this extra, not even by one individual, just teamwork of journalists coming together and just spending hours upon hours upon hours about poring over things. And some things can take hours, some things can take days, some stories could take 6 months, as the investigative reporters and editors, Ire, will tell you. There are some 6 month stories that took 6 months just because that's how much data there was to chew through. That's how much time it took to find that one source that you had to find.
So there's been a few stories over the past few years that I know within my heart I know died just because there was so much of a dump truck of data to go through. So how do you tackle something like that? Do you try and get resources allocated, or you just end up taking it on yourself and kind of piling through every night?
I mean, as an individual, you have to essentially assess whether or not you can chew through it on your own. And there's ways of doing it, obviously. A lot of the one of the immediate things that people point out, or that other reporters, especially investigative reporters, data guys, data journalism, of course, not being a synonym with say hacking or journalism of a tech variety, but Excel sheets save you a lot of trouble. And just because you know how to run an Excel sheet and a few formulas, that does not make you a hacker. It doesn't even make you a data journalist. But if you can run an Excel sheet just so that you don't have to spend as much time, then you're already got a leg up, because consolidating your time is your most valuable aspect as a reporter, because the story needs to be timely. Not every story is an evergreen, and especially not stories that are hard hitting, that are of an investigative nature. So yeah, if you know that you can use simple things like Excel sheet, or hell, even just data visualization tools like Tableau or Click, or any of the things of that variety to make it easier, then go for it. And if you know you can do it, then do it. And if you've got backup from colleagues, then all the better.
Right on. Very cool.
So one of the questions that I had for you that I kind of wanted to save for later, because I know it's kind of broad, but I wanted to touch a little bit on, so we talked about how you get your sources from, like unsuspecting channels because of the ways that information is now disseminated. But how do you as a journalist approach like intentionally deceptive news and content that is spread really quickly? So we talked about the memes and like shooters and incorrect stuff, but what about the active campaigns that people do specifically to disseminate false information?
I was waiting for that special keyword fake news, but I didn't hear it.
Well, I mean, everyone says that. If people say fake news, but it's not even about that. It's more of like there are active deception campaigns that governments put out, and they have for as long as there's been news. But the fact that we have so many platforms to go through and so many bubbles for people to live in, it's just like I've been wondering how journalists actually approach that sanely without losing their mind. That hey, I'm the real story. It's like, how do if somebody you're telling the truth, but somebody else is believing whatever weird website they're on all day.
Yeah.
Just it's difficult to get across to people.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about, which is the most important thing in today's world. If you want to be a reporter who has a job, it's not your ability to write stories. It's not your pedigree. It's not clips or anything in that nature. what makes you a good reporter at this point is your ability to digest large amounts of information, hence why you should be able to churn through headlines that are breaking or go through Excel sheets of data. It's also your ability to parse through information that somebody's giving you. So if you see a headline or if you see something on Twitter about, oh, this is happening, you should be able to very quickly see if that makes your BS meter go off the charts. If somebody's talking to you and they're like, hey, on this story, or, oh, I've got this information for you, you should see clues about whether this seems shisty or not. And it's not so much intuition. You know, there's physical clues there. There's verbal clues there. And that's something that obviously you learn over time. But that's also something that training should be able to give you. A lot of, and this, oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this. A lot of liberal arts degrees, such as political science or psychology, will teach you the skills to go through large amounts of information and to use just critical thinking to say, well, this doesn't seem plausible, and let me test that. And if you don't have that sort of background, fuck's sake, just use Snopes. Snopes will call BS immediately on several things that are breaking, and it takes and they will cite their sources for why something is BS. I mean, the best example I can give are those freaking FEMA coffins that several people would send to me, and they're like, hey, but what about these FEMA coffins that are going, they're after the hurricane? I was like, what? I was like, all right, so let me just destroy that with one sentence. Why would the government put everybody in singular coffins that they're going to kill instead of just putting them in a mass grave? Why do they care?
People are so dumb.
No, but that's my point. It's like, it takes 5 seconds of critical thinking to go, that seems like nonsense. It's just work on your critical thinking skills. There's lots and lots of exercises. Lots of exercises.
It's so frustrating. It really is.
Yeah. But that's the point. Is like, with experience, you will learn with critical thinking skills to go, this doesn't seem proper or this doesn't seem legit. I will do further testing to verify. It's just the good old fashioned scientific method.
I think that, and also looking at the site that it's being sourced from too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because that doesn't take much at all.
bobsblog.com. Okay, yeah, no, we're not going
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to contradict myself. I'm not saying that a small website or a small blog won't have important information. It will. You just have to make sure whether it passes the smell test.
Yep, exactly.
And I can give you one more example of that. There was Ryan Riley. He was a reporter for the Huffington Post Politics. He got infamous in 2014 during the shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson. He posted a picture on Twitter, and he was asking people to tell him what caliber these rubber bullets he found on the ground were. I don't know if this rings any bells with anyone. He had taken a picture of earplugs.
This was like the greatest thing I've ever seen in a long time. It made me laugh so hard when I saw that.
Wait, you saying that they're rubber bullets?
Yeah, these couple of like.
I think I recall seeing that, dude. The orange one.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, all right, so I get it, right? He's never worked on site of a construction job before, so he has no idea what earplugs look like. But he made his credibility look bad, and by effect, he made the credibility of other journalists look bad, because here we have a reporter whose job is to educate other people, and he does not know what earplugs look like. And not only that, but he was like, "Oh, these must be rubber bullets," because obviously the police love to shoot rubber bullets at people.
They love shooting everybody.
Yeah, so like that made a lot of waves, and I mean, I'm sure by now he's probably lived that down, but like that's on the internet. It's never gone away. So if anyone who knows him from that will forever know him as that rubber bullet dude.
Hey, bullets? You want some rubber bullets? You want some bullets to put in your ears to protect?
Oh, come on. It was funny. Don't lie. It was funny.
Oh, it was funny. I just don't.
I mean, in his defense, he was asking people to confirm that those were rubber bullets. It wasn't that he was legit saying they were. So
yeah, but that's a cop out. You know, people frame things like that as, "Hey, could this be blur?" When they.
I don't want to completely condemn him. He was asking a question, and my number one advice is question everything.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, that's a good tagline. I like it.
Yeah. If your mom says she loves you, ask your dad. Get a second source.
Wow. Fuck, dude. That's deep as fuck.
Oh, shit. That's funny.
So, what kind of projects are you looking to get involved in, or anything? Like, are there any things that you want to start covering more, or, I just kind of want to know what your plans are, because you seem like you've you've done quite a bit of this sort of reporting, but you have the mindset to do a lot of other crazy things. I don't know.
Sorry, that's a weird
Well,
question.
No. It's from a forward-looking standpoint. I'm a patron of Houston. I've been here since Hurricane Ike. Houston is growing both in size and prestige. A lot of people are starting to pay attention to Houston as both from a business standpoint and cultural. Not only because Anthony Bourdain came by here last year, not only because GQ said that we're the new capital of Southern Cool, but because we are literally becoming a force, and that is making Houston. Yeah, we're becoming this changing force, and there were a lot of times when I was asking myself, did I want to try to go to a state level or a national level? But to be honest, I'm perfectly happy continuing to cover what's happening in Houston, and both from my day job as a business standpoint, and both from a cultural standpoint, just to archive the things that are happening over time, and whatever that turns into is what it turns into. So. From a practical standpoint, I just try to take things from a day by day and week by week basis. My least favorite question in job interviews, other than why are manhole covers round, is where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because there are so many variables in how that could go down. Shoot, man, a couple more hurricanes. It doesn't really matter what happens in 5 years from now.
That's a fair point. I see you've interviewed at Google at some point. I'm pretty sure that's a Google question for the manhole.
Yeah. Well, manholes are round too, so.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it's been pretty eye-opening, man. A lot of good stuff in a real small amount of time. I'm sure this is just the tip of the iceberg too on that whole career and that path. So where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to go.
Well, hopefully still in what year is this? 2018, 2023?
In the ground.
It's like 2099 or something.
Well, 5 years from now, allegedly, blockchain will be well on its way to becoming the new way that most businesses conduct transactions. So maybe I'll be a blockchain reporter. Who knows?
Do you think McAfee, is he eating his dick or not eating his dick? I think
that's a bit. I remember last time I noted him on Twitter, he was almost getting extradited from somewhere in Latin America, wasn't it? It was a couple years back.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a great tutorial on bath salts the other day, so check that one out.
Yeah, I remember when the whole court thing was happening, because my immediate thought was, man, his trial period is expired.
Wow. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for talking to us. This has been a really awesome talk. I was really impressed with the whole way that this came out, because it's like you don't really think about the ways in which reporters have to approach certain problems that have to be what I would say as the hacker mindset is something that is creative problem solving and trying to, as you said, parse a lot of data and figure out the important parts. Because you can look at whether you're, trying to figure out the source of an issue in a stack trace, or you're trying to go through a million headlines and notifications and sources of information and figure out what is the relevant info that you need to actually do something about it. Those are very similar. So it's really cool to hear you apply that.
Yeah, and one last comment. From the larger national or global level for journalism, there's a lot of criticism that journalism has been defanged, in that either journalism is now just fake news, or paradoxically we are in the pocket of the government. We just write what they tell us to write. And so if that is true, which I don't entirely believe it is, luckily we have hackers who have no qualms about obtaining and leaking documents to make sure that people are informed. So
yeah. Oh yeah, real quick, did you have anything else about the specific like the ethics aspect about where journalists get their sources from? Like, have you ever been given information, or know anybody who's been given information that was obtained through less than
illegal methods?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you approach that as a journalist?
It really depends on what state you're in. For example, in Texas, I'm allowed to record somebody without their permission. So if I can do that, I typically will, because it's a lot easier to get information you need from someone without telling them you're recording them. And I'm not recording them to do a gotcha. I'm simply doing it because my brain and my short-term memory is scrambled, and it'll be way easier for me later on to simply listen to it again, right? So I can get away with it here. Other states aren't like that. So there's a lot of things that are questionably ethical. There are things that are unethical. And if someone else came by and they said, hey, I've got this information for you. By the way, I obtained it illegally. What I really have to do at that point is I'd run it by my editor. The editor would either say yes or no. And if they say maybe, it's probably because they're running it by, their editor or someone else who's higher up or through, our lawyer or someone along those lines. I haven't had that happen specifically, but there have been a lot of times when I've had to back away from something because I was like, this is really questionable. I don't know if this is legit information because all I have is your word. And I know that you are both vested, involved, and somewhat biased against that person.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, from a larger level, I've not hit one of those sorts of situations where somebody's giving me something that has been, I haven't had a Chelsea Manning give me leaked documents. I can tell you like that.
Okay.
So I guess there's a couple of, I guess there's a couple of things that you've mentioned throughout the show that maybe are some takeaways for some hackers that I don't want to hurt your cause, but also want to help some probably half-drunk hackers out there that if you are talking to a journalist while you're at a conference and you're in a state where that they can record you without telling you, you might want to think twice about what you say, regardless of and how drunk you might be.
I will say, if I'm not mistaken, Las Vegas is also a state where you can record someone in that party as long as one of those parties is aware they are being recorded. The other party does not have to be aware. And obviously, DEF CON is held in Las Vegas, so keep that in mind.
Yep. That's about a resident. That's true.
I'll see you at reInvent, you fucking journalist.
The casino.
Now, see, here's the thing. Reporters, or I should say, hackers. In my mind, I've interacted with them here in Houston. I've been to DEF CON twice now, so I go out of my way to regard hackers with respect, especially if I'm talking to them. So I do that. I can't verify that other reporters do that. Always, treat reporters like lawyers, which is with a healthy level of respect and skepticism and contempt.
Sorry, it's treachery.
No,
did you guys?
We need lawyers.
Did you guys see the motherboard article on the Monero party at Vegas this year?
Oh
No,
God,
sure.
I missed the Monero party too. I was so mad about that.
Well, yeah, you would have had some.
That was me in the
some
video.
Right.
I was at 801. I think they both ended at the same time because people were going too hard.
Yeah,
I'll
say this. I was particularly happy about Sky Talks this year at DEF CON because I was privileged enough to get to interview Blue Knight, and they didn't have to let me talk to him. And I know that they've had shifting rules about the press's role at Sky Talks because Sky Talks are off the record. So that was a treat. And also the social engineering village, because social engineering is the one aspect of hacking that directly relates to my ability as a reporter. Like, reporters have to be able to socially engineer, as many people do in their various jobs and industries.
That's very true.
The DVD thing touched the corner, by the way.
What was it?
You just touched the corner?
Did I miss it? Did I miss it? God damn it!
Was there another one?
All right. Well, last addition to this is Shell. Wow.
Hey, so real quick, did you want to plug your anything or any sites?
Oh, who, me? I think I covered all my bases. So
Okay, right on.
Dead Dialect is the podcast that I write news stories for. Best podcast in Houston is voted by Houston Press, if I'm not mistaken.
Are you a member of Press?
You can you can also find, if you're interested in keeping track of me, I go by nodyaH on Twitter and Instagram, nodyaH_. And other than that, it's basically just my day job, which I really wouldn't cite because I would have fear of being called into the office the next day and having my editor say, what the hell is ThugCrowd? So yeah.
Well, ask him to come on.
Yeah.
I'm about ready to send these talks to my CEO. He's been asking me about blockchain for like years. I think it's interesting that we're still talking about it in this day and age. And like I was saying earlier, PII and having it like as a real use case is going to be something that's set in stone. So
keep in mind the timeline. It's been 10 years for a blockchain as it applies to cryptocurrencies, obviously, because the 2008 Bitcoin white paper. The financial industry got in 2013. They've had 5 years to chew on it. The oil and gas industry is still in the infancy stage. So everybody's got their own starting point.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. We've got our tickers down in the corner there for a reason. You know?
IBM seed to sale cannabis. Whoa.
Yep. It'll be going up with Iran.
Oh yeah. So thanks everybody for joining. Next week we are going to be talking with Joseph Hall. Thanks RQU for this, by the way, about election hacking, which I'm really excited about. And until then, I guess hit us up on Twitter at ThugCrowd. We have all of our social media at the bottom there. Our Patreon supporters.
Hell yeah! Thanks, guys. By the way,
yes, thank all of you for being Patreon supporters. Anybody who is a Patreon supporter will be getting the CLSSP cert service out. We'll be designing this soon. But our Patreon supporters are Chris Wallace, Harmony, Null Cookies, Rob Poners, and Sterling Archer. Thanks, guys, for being on our team and helping us out.
Huge thanks.
Also, who it's weekendhack.in for anybody who wants to get involved in our CTF stream that is almost a month.
Yeah, November coming up.
We're still taking people if they want to be a part of it, and we will be organizing the actual infrastructure for it and putting that information out to everybody very soon. So until then, thanks everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Peace,
guys. Do your thing and leak all the
Thanks for
shit.
having me.
Later.
Bye.